Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. This is my story, one I never thought I'd share, but maybe someone out there needs to hear it. What happened to me changed everything I believed in about love, trust, and betrayal. So here it goes. The cheap, imitation leather guest chair sighed under my weight as I lowered myself into it. The bouquet of lilies, Pamela's favorites, feeling suddenly awkward and oversized in my hands. I'd pictured this moment so differently. Me, striding in like the hero of a romantic comedy, flowers aloft, sweeping my wife off her feet with a surprise anniversary lunch. Instead, I was sitting in the sterile, impersonal lobby of Prestige Solutions, her new workplace, feeling more like an intruder than a loving husband. The air was thick with the scent of industrial cleaner and that faint, metallic tang of overworked air conditioning. It had been a hell of a morning already, and the universe, it seemed, was just getting warmed up. You see, moments earlier, a man I could only assume was Pamela's boss, a slick character with a suit sharper than his smile, had breezed past me. He barely spared me a glance before barking over his shoulder, "Facilities finally sent someone for that flickering light in my office. Good. Get to it. And try not to scuff the Italian marble, all right?" He didn't even break stride. Italian marble. Right. I was wearing my best casual shirt, decent jeans, the ones Pamela said made me look younger. I'd even splashed on that cologne she loved. Janitor. He thought I was the janitor. My jaw tightened, a slow burn starting in my chest. I almost laughed, the absurdity of it. But then a colder, more unsettling thought slithered in. If her boss didn't even recognize a picture of me from her desk, assuming she even had one up, what else didn't he know? Or rather, what didn't I know? That was the hook, the tiny little snag in the fabric of my reality that, if I'd pulled on it right then, might have unraveled everything much sooner. But I didn't. I just sat there, the lilies starting to wilt in my suddenly clammy grip, waiting for Pamela, and trying to shake off the man's dismissive words. Little did I know, that casual, arrogant insult was just the opening act to the systematic demolition of the life I thought I knew. Pamela and I, we were supposed to be the endgame. 15 years we'd been married, 20 years since we first bumped into each other at a dusty old bookstore, both reaching for the same worn copy of The Great Gatsby. Cliché, I know, but it felt like fate back then. She was vibrant, a whirlwind of laughter and ambition, with eyes that could see right through you and a smile that made you feel like the only person in the room. I was quieter, more introspective, a software developer who found solace in logic and code. We were different, sure, but we complemented each other. We built a life, brick by brick. A small house in a decent neighborhood, 2 amazing kids, a son, Michael, just about to head off to college, and a daughter, Chloe, navigating the treacherous waters of high school. We'd had our ups and downs, like any couple. Financial stresses, disagreements about parenting, the occasional dry spell where life just got too busy. But I always believed our foundation was solid. I loved her. God, I loved her. More than words could say, or so I thought. I trusted her implicitly. She was my rock, my confidant, the woman I planned to grow old and gray with, bickering over who got the last biscuit. This new job of hers, as an executive assistant at Prestige Solutions, was a recent thing. She'd been a stay-at-home mom for years while the kids were younger, then worked part-time at a local library. This was her big return to the corporate world, a chance for her to spread her wings again, to feel that sense of professional accomplishment. I was her biggest cheerleader, or so I thought. The hours were longer, the commute tougher, and she often came home exhausted, stressed about deadlines and her demanding boss, Mr. Alistair Finch. That was his name, the Italian marble aficionado. She complained about him, called him arrogant, a micromanager, a bit of a creep sometimes with his compliments that always felt a little too personal. I listened, offered sympathy, told her to stand her ground, even suggested she look for something else if he was too much. But she'd always insisted it was manageable, that the money was good, and the experience invaluable. Looking back, every complaint, every shared frustration now feels like a carefully constructed lie, a smokescreen. The plan for our 15th anniversary was simple, or so I thought. Michael was away on a college tour, and Chloe was at a weekend debate camp. It was just going to be us. I'd booked her favorite restaurant for the evening, but I wanted to do something special during the day too. Hence, the surprise lunch. I'd taken the day off, spent the morning picking out the perfect lilies, white, with just a hint of pink, just like the ones at our wedding. I'd even written a stupid, sappy card that I now felt a burning shame even thinking about. The idea was to whisk her away from her desk, take her somewhere nice and quiet, remind her that amidst the stress of her new job and the chaos of family life, we were still us. John and Pamela. Unbreakable. Invincible. That's the delusion I was operating under. I felt a little thrill of excitement as I pulled into the visitor parking of the sleek, modern office building. Prestige Solutions. Even the name sounded a bit pretentious. The lobby was all glass and steel, hushed and intimidating. The receptionist, a young woman with an expression of bored professionalism, barely looked up when I asked for Pamela Hayes. She's on the 4th floor, executive wing. You can take the elevator, but you'll need her to come get you if you don't have an access card for that floor, she'd said, her voice monotone. That was a slight hiccup. I didn't want to call Pamela and spoil the surprise. I figured I'd just go up to the 4th floor and maybe catch her in a common area or ask someone to let her know I was there. I wasn't expecting Fort Knox. So there I was, lilies in hand, trying to figure out my next move when Mr. Finch made his grand entrance and his even grander pronouncement about my supposed custodial duties. The humiliation was a sharp, bitter pill. I'm not a snob. I have immense respect for janitors and every person who works hard for a living. My own father worked in a factory his whole life. It wasn't the job itself, it was the assumption, the instant dismissal, the sheer arrogance of the man not even considering I could be anything else. He hadn't asked, "Can I help you?" Or, "Are you here to see someone?" No, it was straight to, "You're the janitor. Fix my light." I stood up, clearing my throat, ready to correct him, to say, "Actually, I'm here to see my wife, Pamela Hayes, for our anniversary." But he was already gone, disappearing down a corridor with a dismissive wave of his hand. I felt a flush creep up my neck. A few people in the lobby had glanced over, their faces carefully neutral, but I could feel their pitying or amused stares. My grand romantic gesture was already turning into a farce. I should have turned around right then, walked out, and waited for Pamela at home. Oh, how I wish I had. But I was stubborn. I was there for my wife. I was going to see her. I took a deep breath, pushed down the anger and embarrassment, and approached the elevator, hoping for the best. The problem was, the best was already far behind me, disappearing in the rearview mirror of my life. The worst? The worst was waiting for me on the 4th floor. The elevator doors opened onto a hallway that was even quieter and more opulent than the lobby. Plush carpeting muffled my footsteps, and the walls were adorned with abstract art that probably cost more than my car. This was clearly where the big shots resided. I could hear the distant hum of office activity, keyboards clicking, muted conversations, but the executive wing itself felt eerily deserted. I started walking, peering at the nameplates on the doors. Alistair Finch, CEO. That was him, the janitor assigner. His door was slightly ajar, and I could hear his booming voice inside, though I couldn't make out the words. For a fleeting second, I considered sticking my head in and giving him a piece of my mind, but the desire to find Pamela was stronger. I continued down the hall, my unease growing with every step. Where was everyone? Where was Pamela? Her desk was supposed to be near Finch's office, according to what she'd told me. I saw a door labeled Executive Suite. P. Hayes. My heart gave a little leap. Finally. The lilies felt heavy, their sweet scent suddenly cloying. I raised my hand to knock, a smile finally forming on my face, ready to see her surprised expression. But then I heard it. Laughter. Pamela's laughter. It was unmistakable, that musical sound I'd fallen in love with. But there was something else in it too, a breathless, almost giddy quality I hadn't heard in a long, long time. It wasn't the tired, stressed laughter she usually brought home these days. This was different. And then, another voice. A man's voice. Finch's voice. Deep, confident, and far too close to Pamela's laughter for my liking. My hand froze inches from the door. The smile vanished from my face, replaced by a cold dread. What was going on? My mind raced, trying to find an innocent explanation. Maybe they were having a meeting, a particularly amusing one. Maybe he was telling a joke. But the tone, the intimacy I thought I detected in their intermingled voices sent a shiver down my spine. Against my better judgment, propelled by a force I couldn't name, I leaned closer to the door, which was, I now realized, not quite latched. There was a tiny gap, just enough to. No, I couldn't. I shouldn't. But I did. I peeked. And the world, as I knew it, ended. It shattered into a million irreparable pieces right there in that silent, carpeted hallway. The lilies slipped from my grasp, scattering white and pink petals on the expensive floor like fallen hopes. The scene that greeted my eyes is burned into my memory, a permanent, searing brand. It plays on a loop in my darkest nights, a silent movie of betrayal. Pamela, my Pamela, was not at her desk. She was standing very close to Alistair Finch, her back partially to the door. His hand was on her waist, his thumb stroking her side in a way that was anything but professional. Her head was tilted back, and she was looking up at him, that giddy, breathless laugh still echoing faintly. He murmured something I couldn't hear, and then he leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't a peck on the cheek. It was a kiss. A real, lingering, passionate kiss. The kind a man gives a woman he's intimate with. The kind I hadn't received from her in months, maybe longer. My wife. Kissing her boss. The boss who thought I was the janitor. The irony was a cruel, vicious punch to the gut. Time seemed to stop. The air in my lungs turned to ice. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't think. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, a horrific, mesmerizing spectacle of destruction. My destruction. Her hand, the one with our wedding ring still on it, came up to cup his cheek. Our wedding ring. The symbol of our vows, our commitment, our 15 years. It was all a lie. Everything was a lie. The long hours, the stress, his creepy compliments, it was all a meticulously crafted deception. How long? How long had this been going on? Weeks? Months? Since she started this job? The question screamed in my head, a silent torment. My vision tunneled. The plush carpet, the abstract art, the scent of lilies, it all receded, replaced by a roaring in my ears and a hollow, aching void in my chest where my heart used to be. I saw her smile against his lips, a smile of pure, unadulterated happiness. A happiness she clearly wasn't finding with me anymore. That was the cut that went deepest. It wasn't just the physical betrayal, but the emotional one. She looked happy with him. Truly, undeniably happy. And I, the man who had loved her for 2 decades, the father of her children, her supposed rock, was just the janitor. An obstacle. An afterthought. A fool. I stumbled back from the door, a choked, animalistic sound escaping my throat. I think I might have made a noise, because I saw a flicker of movement inside, a slight tensing in Finch's posture. But I didn't wait to see if they'd noticed. I couldn't. I turned and fled, my legs moving on autopilot, desperate to escape that office, that building, that entire, soul-crushing reality. The scattered lilies on the floor were the only evidence of my shattered dreams, a pathetic tribute to an anniversary that would now forever be a monument to my wife's betrayal. The elevator ride down was an eternity of silent agony. My reflection in the polished steel doors was a stranger, a pale, hollow-eyed man with a gaping wound where his life used to be. I could feel the stares of the other passengers, probably wondering about the disheveled guy who looked like he'd seen a ghost. If only they knew. I practically ran through the lobby, past the bored receptionist who didn't give me a second glance, past the ghost of Alistair Finch's earlier insult. The Italian marble felt cold and indifferent beneath my feet. Out in the parking lot, the sunlight was too bright, the air too fresh. It felt like an affront, this normal, ordinary day, while my entire world had just imploded. I fumbled for my car keys, my hand shaking so violently I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I drove away from Prestige Solutions, I didn't look back. I couldn't bear to. Each mile I put between myself and that building was a mile further into a new, terrifying landscape of pain and uncertainty. The drive home is a blur. I remember gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I remember the city sounds, car horns, sirens, the distant rumble of traffic, all blending into a meaningless cacophony that mirrored the chaos in my head. How could she do this? How could Pamela, my Pamela, betray me like this? The woman who had cried in my arms when her mother passed away, the woman I'd held through countless nights when the kids were sick, the woman who had promised to love me in sickness and in health, for better or for worse. Apparently, for worse meant me, and for better meant her arrogant, marble-loving boss. The questions kept coming, relentless and brutal. Was any of it real? Our life? Our marriage? Our family? Had she ever truly loved me? Or was I just a comfortable placeholder until someone better came along? The thought was a viper, coiling around my heart, squeezing the life out of it. My mind replayed every recent interaction, every late night at work she'd had, every excuse she'd made for being distant or tired. They all took on a sinister new meaning. Her stress was her guilt. Her exhaustion was from her affair. Her demanding boss was her lover. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity, forming a picture of deceit so profound it made me physically sick. I had to pull over to the side of the road at one point, overcome with nausea, dry heaving until my stomach ached. The shame was as potent as the grief. How had I been so blind? So stupidly, naively trusting? Had everyone else known? Were our friends, our family, laughing at me behind my back? The cuckolded husband, the oblivious fool, the janitor. Finch's insult echoed in my mind, no longer just an arrogant dismissal, but a symbol of my own perceived worthlessness in this new, cruel narrative. He hadn't just mistaken me for the janitor. In a way, he'd relegated me to that position in my own life, sweeping aside my marriage, my dignity, with casual disdain. And Pamela? She'd let him. She'd helped him. When I finally stumbled through the front door of our house, our home, the place that was supposed to be my sanctuary, it felt alien. Every photograph on the wall, every piece of furniture, every trinket we'd collected over the years seemed to mock me. The happy family portraits, the silly souvenirs from our vacations, her art supplies scattered on the kitchen table where she'd been working on a project. Lies. All of it. I walked through the silent rooms like a ghost, touching things, trying to reconcile the life I thought I had with the one that had just been revealed to me. Her scent lingered in the bedroom, on her pillow, a cruel reminder of the intimacy we'd once shared, an intimacy she was now sharing with another man. I found myself in our closet, staring at her clothes hanging next to mine. Her dresses, her blouses, the lingerie I'd bought her, now tainted, symbols of her duplicity. I wanted to tear them all down, to burn them, to erase every trace of her. But I didn't. I just sank to the floor, surrounded by the remnants of our shattered life, and for the first time since I was a child, I wept. Not quiet, dignified tears, but racking, gut-wrenching sobs of pure, unadulterated agony. The pain was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest, making it hard to breathe. It was the death of a marriage, the death of trust, the death of the future I had so carefully planned. How do you come back from something like this? How do you unsee what you've seen? How do you unlove someone who has ripped your heart out and stomped on it with such casual cruelty? I didn't have any answers. All I had was the crushing weight of betrayal and the horrifying realization that the woman I had pledged my life to was a stranger. A stranger who was, at that very moment, probably still in the arms of her lover, laughing, while I was falling apart. The afternoon wore on, each tick of the clock a hammer blow against my fractured sanity. I waited. I didn't know what I was waiting for. For her to come home? For an explanation? For an apology? Or was I waiting for the courage to confront her, to unleash the storm of rage and grief that was building inside me? I replayed the scene at her office, then the janitor comment, over and over. The humiliation, the betrayal, it all swirled into a toxic brew. The thought of her boss, Finch, looking down on me, dismissing me, while he was sleeping with my wife, it was a special kind of hell. And Pamela, my Pamela, how could she be so callous, so deceitful? The loving wife, the devoted mother, was that all an act? A carefully constructed facade to hide the truth of her affair? The hours crawled by. I didn't eat. I didn't drink. I just sat there, in the gathering darkness, the silence of the house amplifying the turmoil in my soul. And then, I heard her car pull into the driveway, her key in the lock, the sound of her footsteps in the hall. Showtime. Pamela walked in, humming softly to herself, a stark contrast to the storm raging within me. She looked content. That was the word. Content, and a little flushed, as if she'd just had a particularly invigorating afternoon. The sight of her, so calm, so oblivious to the devastation she'd wrought, sent a fresh wave of anger, cold and sharp, through me. She finally noticed me then, sitting in the dim light of the living room, and her cheerfulness faltered. "John, what are you doing sitting in the dark? You scared me. Is everything okay?" Her voice, usually a comfort, now grated on my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. "Is everything okay?" The question was so absurd, so utterly clueless, that a laugh, harsh and humorless, escaped my lips. "Okay? No, Pamela, everything is not okay. Not by a long shot." I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, surprise, then a dawning awareness, perhaps a hint of fear. She was smart. She knew my tone. This wasn't a normal conversation. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice a little more cautious now. She put her purse down on the console table, her movements suddenly less fluid. "What's wrong?" I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "I went to your office today, Pamela." Her face paled. I saw her swallow, her eyes darting around the room as if looking for an escape route. "My office? Why? You didn't tell me you were coming." "It was supposed to be a surprise," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "For our anniversary. I brought you lilies." I gestured vaguely towards the door, as if the ghost of the flowers was still there. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw genuine panic. "Oh, John. I I was so busy today. Mr. Finch had me running around all afternoon." "Mr. Finch." The name was a venomous dart. "Yes, I'm sure he did," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm sure you were both very, very busy." I stood up then, unable to remain seated any longer. I felt like a caged animal, prowling, restless. "I saw you, Pamela." The words hung in the air, heavy and damning. She flinched as if I'd struck her. "Saw me? What are you talking about?" But her denial was weak, her gaze shifty. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Don't lie to me, Pamela. Not anymore. I saw you with Finch. In his office. Or rather, near his office, by your suite. I saw you kissing him. There, it was out. The ugly, brutal truth, spoken aloud in the sanctuary of our home. The silence that followed was deafening. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly agape, the color completely drained from her face. She looked like a cornered animal, trapped and exposed. For a moment, I thought she might deny it again, try to gaslight me, tell me I was crazy, that I'd imagined it. But then, her shoulders slumped, and a small, broken sound escaped her lips. It wasn't a sob, not yet. It was the sound of defeat. "John," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I. I can explain. Explain. I almost shouted the word. Explain what? Pamela? Explain how you've been systematically lying to me, betraying me, making a fool out of me? Explain how our 15 years of marriage, our family, our life together meant so little to you that you could just throw it all away for your boss. The rage was building now, hot and fierce, threatening to consume me. I wanted to scream, to break things, to unleash the torrent of pain she had inflicted. But I also saw the fear in her eyes, and a tiny, perverse part of me wanted to see her squirm, to see her suffer even a fraction of what I was feeling. How long, Pamela? I asked, my voice deadly calm. How long has this been going on? She hesitated, wringing her hands, her gaze fixed on the floor. A few months, she finally mumbled, so quietly I almost didn't hear her. A few months. Not a one-time mistake. Not a fleeting moment of weakness. A sustained, calculated affair. Months of lies, months of deception. Every "I love you," every touch, every shared moment during that time was now tainted. A lie. A few months. I echoed, the words like stones in my mouth. You've been sleeping with him for months, while coming home to me, to our children? Her silence was her confession. The image of her with Finch, laughing, kissing, flashed in my mind again, and with it, another memory, Finch's dismissive words. Get to it. And try not to scuff the Italian marble, all right? The janitor. He was sleeping with my wife, and he thought I was the janitor. The humiliation, the rage, the grief, it all coalesced into a single, burning point of focus. Justice. No, not just justice. Revenge. The days that followed that initial confrontation were a blur of hushed, angry conversations, sleepless nights spent in separate rooms, and an oppressive silence that filled our home like a poisonous gas. Pamela swung between tearful apologies and defensive justifications. She said it just happened, that Finch had pursued her, that she was lonely, that our marriage had been stale for years. Each excuse was another knife in my gut. Stale? Was our life, our family, just an old loaf of bread to be discarded when something fresher came along? She claimed it wasn't serious, that it was a mistake, that she loved me, that she wanted to fix things. But her words felt hollow, rehearsed. How could I believe anything she said anymore? The trust, the very bedrock of our relationship, had been pulverized. I saw the affair not just as a betrayal of me, but of our children, Michael and Chloe. How would we tell them? How could their mother, the woman they adored, have done something so destructive? The thought of their pain, their confusion, added another layer to my own agony. I moved into the guest room. Sleeping in the bed we had shared for 15 years was unbearable. Every night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, the scene in her office replaying endlessly in my mind, morphing into grotesque caricatures. Finch's smug face, Pamela's ecstatic smile, the casual intimacy that had destroyed my world. And always, always, the insult, janitor. It became a symbol of my emasculation, my perceived inadequacy. He hadn't just taken my wife. He'd stripped me of my dignity in the process, dismissed me as insignificant even before I knew the extent of his transgression. I started digging quietly at first. I needed to understand the scope of this. I looked at our phone records, our credit card statements. There were lunches I didn't know about, unexplained expenses, late-night texts. The evidence mounted, painting a grim picture of a calculated, ongoing affair, not some spontaneous mistake. Pamela, meanwhile, tried to act as if things could somehow go back to normal. She'd make my coffee in the morning, ask about my day, try to initiate conversations. But it was like watching a bad actor play the role of a loving wife. There was a desperation in her eyes, a forced cheerfulness that made my skin crawl. The love I'd felt for her was rapidly curdling into a toxic mixture of anger, contempt, and a profound, aching sadness. The man she was trying to win back no longer existed. He died on the floor of that office building, amidst scattered lilies. The thought of Alistair Finch filled me with a particular kind of rage. He was the catalyst, the predator, from what Pamela had let slip, and from my own brief, humiliating encounter. He was an arrogant, power-tripping narcissist. He likely saw Pamela as just another conquest, a perk of his executive position. Did he even care about the lives he was wrecking? I doubted it. People like Finch rarely do. They operate on a different plane, one where consequences are for little people. People like me, the janitor. And that's when the idea of revenge started to take root. It wasn't a noble thought. It was dark, consuming, born of pain and humiliation. But it was also empowering. The feeling of helplessness, of being a victim, began to recede, replaced by a cold, focused determination. I couldn't fix my marriage. I couldn't erase the betrayal. But I could sure as hell make Alistair Finch pay. And Pamela, well, Pamela would face her own reckoning. My revenge wouldn't be about violence or petty vandalism. That wasn't my style. It had to be smarter, more insidious. It had to hit Finch where he lived, his ego, his reputation, his precious prestige solutions. And the janitor comment? Oh, that was going to be the centerpiece of his downfall. I started to formulate a plan, a multi-layered strategy that would require patience, precision, and a willingness to walk a very fine line. The first step was to play along to a certain extent. I let Pamela believe there was a sliver of hope for reconciliation. This wasn't out of any desire to actually reconcile. That ship had sailed, hit an iceberg, and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. No, this was tactical. I needed her to remain comfortable, to not suspect what I was really doing. I needed information, and she, unwittingly, was going to provide it. I started asking subtle questions about her work, about Finch, about the company culture. She, eager to please, to show me she was being transparent, started talking. And the more she talked, the clearer my path became. Finch, it turned out, wasn't just an arrogant boss. He was apparently playing fast and loose with company ethics, cutting corners, and, according to some office gossip Pamela relayed, possibly involved in some shady dealings to inflate profits and his own bonuses. This was gold. Pure, unadulterated gold. My revenge wouldn't just be personal. It could be professionally devastating for him. The pieces were starting to fall into place. The janitor was about to clean house, but not in the way Alistair Finch ever could have imagined. The next few weeks were a strange dance of deception and quiet investigation. On the surface, I maintained a fragile truce with Pamela. We were civil, distant. I let her believe I was processing, that I was considering therapy, that our marriage wasn't irretrievably broken. It was a nauseating charade, but a necessary one. Each forced smile, each feigned moment of contemplation was a step closer to my goal. Meanwhile, my evenings, after Pamela was asleep or preoccupied, were spent in a different kind of processing. I became a digital ghost, meticulously sifting through publicly available information about prestige solutions in Alistair Finch. Annual reports, press releases, LinkedIn profiles, even employee reviews on sites like Glassdoor. I was looking for patterns, for vulnerabilities, for anything that could substantiate the rumors Pamela had inadvertently fed me. She'd mention offhand comments about creative accounting Finch had joked about in meetings, or how he'd pushed through a supplier contract with a company that had a less-than-stellar reputation but offered incentives. These weren't concrete proofs, but they were breadcrumbs, and I followed them diligently. I even created a discreet, anonymous email address and reached out to a couple of disgruntled ex-employees I found who had left Prestige Solutions under cloudy circumstances. I presented myself as a freelance journalist working on a piece about corporate ethics in their sector. One of them, a former accountant who'd apparently been pushed out after raising concerns, responded. He was cautious at first, but after a few careful email exchanges where I built some rapport and assured him of anonymity, he started to open up. He didn't have smoking gun documents he could share. Finch was too careful for that. But he painted a picture of a CEO who prioritized appearances and personal gain above all else. A man who bent rules until they screamed, but rarely outright broke them in easily provable ways. He mentioned Finch's obsession with the company's stock price and his almost pathological need to project an image of flawless success, especially to the board and major investors. This was key. Finch's Achilles heel wasn't just his arrogance, it was his vanity and his terror of public failure. The janitor comment still echoed in my mind, not just as an insult, but as a thematic cornerstone for my plan. Finch saw people like me as invisible, as beneath his notice. I would use that very invisibility against him. My plan began to solidify. It wouldn't be a single, dramatic act of sabotage, but rather a series of carefully orchestrated pinpricks designed to unravel his carefully constructed image and expose his underhanded tactics, all culminating in a moment that would directly involve his dismissal of me. I needed a stage and an audience. The company had an upcoming annual shareholders meeting, a big to-do where Finch would be front and center, peacocking about the company's stellar performance. This would be my theater. During this time, my interactions with Pamela were a masterclass in emotional detachment, or so I tried to make them. Inside, I was a wreck. Seeing her every day, living a lie, was eating away at me. There were moments I almost broke, moments I wanted to scream at her, to confront her with the full depth of my disgust. But I held back, fueled by my singular focus on Finch. She, on the other hand, seemed to be relaxing into this new, albeit strained, normal. She probably thought I was coming around, that time was healing the wounds. She'd even started dropping hints about us again, about how much she missed me, missed our life. It took every ounce of my willpower not to laugh bitterly in her face. One evening, she came home particularly animated. "You won't believe what happened today," she said, almost conspiratorially. "Finch is in a complete panic. There are rumors of an anonymous tip to the SEC about some irregularities in our quarterly reports. He's been storming around the office all day, demanding to know who could have done it." I kept my expression neutral, feigning mild interest. "Oh, really? That sounds serious." Inside, a small, grim smile played on my lips. The anonymous tip, carefully worded and sent through encrypted channels, had been my first move. It wasn't specific enough to trigger a full-blown investigation immediately, but it was enough to plant a seed of doubt, to get some regulatory eyes looking in Finch's direction, and, more importantly, to rattle his cage. He was already feeling the heat. This was just the overture. The main performance was yet to come, and it would involve a janitor's uniform, a hidden camera, and Alistair Finch's very public humiliation. The beauty of it was that Finch himself had provided me with the perfect disguise and the perfect motive for being in places I shouldn't be, doing things I shouldn't do. He thought I was the janitor? Fine. I would be the most effective janitor he'd ever encountered, dedicated to cleaning up his mess in a way he never anticipated. My technical skills as a software developer also came into play. I wasn't a hacker in the malicious sense, but I knew my way around systems, security, and, crucially, how to recover data that people thought was deleted. Pamela often brought her work laptop home. She wasn't careless, but she wasn't overly cautious either. With the right pretext, helping her with a software glitch, I managed to get limited access. I didn't find a treasure trove of illegal activities. Finch was too slippery for that. But I found enough. Internal emails where he pressured the finance department to use aggressive accounting methods, drafts of reports that were significantly altered before publication, and a calendar filled with discrete meetings with individuals linked to those questionable suppliers. Nothing illegal on its own, perhaps, but together they painted a picture of a man obsessed with appearances and willing to sail very close to the wind. This, combined with the ex-employee's testimony and the SEC tip, was building a compelling narrative. The day of the Prestige Solutions shareholders meeting arrived, cloaked in a gray, drizzly morning that perfectly mirrored my mood, a grim anticipation. Pamela had left early, dressed in her power suit, a nervous energy about her. Finch, she'd said, was a wreck. obsessed with everything being perfect for the presentation. He needed to project confidence, especially with the SEC rumors swirling. Little did he know, his day was about to get a whole lot worse, thanks to the man he'd mistaken for a janitor. My preparations were complete. The previous week, I'd managed to acquire a standard-issue janitorial uniform, a drab gray jumpsuit, from a theatrical costume shop. It was surprisingly easy. I'd also purchased a high-quality button camera, tiny enough to be inconspicuous, powerful enough to capture clear video and audio. The plan was audacious, perhaps even a little crazy, but the thought of Finch's face when it all unraveled was a potent motivator. I arrived at the hotel where the shareholders' meeting was being held about an hour before it was due to start. The place was already buzzing with activity, men and women in sharp business attire, event staff rushing around, an air of corporate importance. Walking in through a service entrance, dressed in my janitor's uniform and carrying a mop bucket for effect, was ridiculously easy. No one gave me a second glance. I was invisible, just another part of the background. This was the core of Finch's arrogance. People like me didn't register. I found a quiet utility closet on the same floor as the main conference hall, a perfect staging area. I checked my button camera, ensuring it was recording, and positioned it carefully on my jumpsuit. Then, I waited, my heart pounding a steady rhythm against my ribs. I knew Finch would be in a nearby VIP holding room before the meeting, probably doing some last-minute preparations, pacing, and barking orders. My aim wasn't to confront him directly. Not yet. It was to be a fly on the wall, to capture him in his natural, unfiltered state, the arrogant, dismissive bully. As predicted, about 20 minutes before the meeting, Finch swept into the VIP room, his entourage trailing behind him. The door was propped open slightly for catering staff, and I, pretending to be diligently mopping the corridor nearby, had a clear line of sight and sound. My button camera was rolling. Finch was in classic form. He was berating an assistant about the slide presentation, his voice sharp and condescending. "Are you an idiot?" I said the growth projections needed to be more aggressive. "It's about confidence, you moron. Perception is reality." Then he turned his attention to Pamela, who was trying to hand him some documents. Later, "Pamela, can't you see I'm busy? And for God's sake, try to look less like a frightened rabbit. Your stress is stressing me out." He didn't even look at her, just waved her away dismissively. The casual cruelty was breathtaking. This was the man she'd betrayed me for. The camera was capturing it all, his tone, his words, his utter contempt for his staff. This was gold. After a few more minutes of his tirade, he noticed me, the janitor, mopping a little too close to his sanctum. His eyes narrowed. "You," he barked, pointing a finger at me. "What are you doing loitering here? Haven't you finished yet? This area needs to be spotless before the shareholders arrive. Some people just have no work ethic." He didn't recognize me. Of course, he didn't. Why would he? I was just part of the scenery beneath his notice. This was perfect. "Sorry, sir," I mumbled, keeping my head down. "Just making sure everything is perfect for you, sir." "Well, be quick about it, and then make yourself scarce," he snapped, before turning back to his sycophants. The camera had it all. His arrogance, his dismissiveness, his clear belief that service staff were little more than inconvenient fixtures. I continued my mopping for a few more minutes, then retreated to my utility closet. I had what I needed from that encounter. Phase 1 complete. Phase 2 was the meeting itself. I wouldn't disrupt it directly. Instead, just before it started, I accidentally left a USB drive in the press kit distribution area. A USB drive clearly labeled Finch, Private Memos and Commentary. On it was a carefully curated selection of the emails I'd recovered, the one showing him pressuring the finance department, along with an audio file, a very clear recording from my button camera of his earlier tirade in the VIP room, including his charming comments to his staff and to me, the janitor. I also included a transcript of the conversation with the ex-employee, heavily redacted to protect the source, but outlining the culture of fear and corner-cutting at Prestige. It wasn't enough to send him to jail, but it was certainly enough to cause a massive PR nightmare and raise serious questions among shareholders and the board about his leadership and character. I then slipped into the back of the vast conference hall, still in my uniform, blending in with the hotel staff. I wanted to see his face. Finch took the stage, all smug confidence and practiced charm. He launched into his speech, painting a glowing picture of Prestige Solutions. The stock price was up, profits were soaring, the future was bright. He was masterful, I had to give him that. He was a consummate performer. But as he spoke, I could see a few journalists in the press section starting to look at their laptops with intense interest, whispering to each other. Someone had found the USB drive. A slow smile spread across my face. The pinpricks were starting to hit. During the Q&A session, it began. A journalist from a well-known financial paper stood up. "Mr. Finch," she said, her voice polite but firm. "We've received some troubling information regarding internal pressures on your finance department to meet aggressive targets, as well as allegations of a hostile work environment for some of your staff. Could you comment on these internal memos and a rather unflattering recording of your behavior earlier today?" Finch's smile froze. I saw a flicker of panic in his eyes, quickly masked. "I'm not aware of any such memos," he blustered. "And as for recordings, that sounds like a ridiculous fabrication. Prestige Solutions prides itself on its ethical conduct and supportive work environment." But the seed was planted. More hands went up. The questions became more pointed. The atmosphere in the room shifted from polite attentiveness to palpable tension. Finch was visibly sweating under the stage lights, his bravado starting to crack. My heart was pounding. This was it. The janitor, the invisible man, had just thrown a very large wrench into Alastair Finch's well-oiled machine. And Pamela? I saw her in the front row, her face ashen. She knew. She must have recognized the context of those memos, perhaps even the tone of the recording. Her eyes darted towards the back of the room, searching, and for a moment, I thought she saw me. But then the moment passed. Her world, too, was starting to crumble. The fallout from the shareholders' meeting was swift and brutal, far exceeding my expectations. The Finch memos, and the VIP room recording, as the press gleefully dubbed them, went viral within hours. News outlets picked up the story, not just financial papers but mainstream media too, drawn by the irresistible narrative of an arrogant CEO caught red-handed. The recording of Finch berating his staff, and particularly his dismissive comments to the janitor, became a symbol of corporate hubris. Hashtags like #Finchgate and #JanitorRevenge started trending. It was a PR disaster of epic proportions for Prestige Solutions. Their stock price, Finch's beloved metric, took an immediate nosedive. The board of directors, initially trying to downplay the incident, found themselves under immense pressure from shareholders and the public. Within a week, Alastair Finch was forced to resign. His carefully constructed empire, built on arrogance and deceit, had crumbled under the weight of his own words and actions, amplified by the efforts of the man he'd so casually dismissed. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a strange mixture of triumph and emptiness swirling within me. There was a grim satisfaction in seeing Finch get his comeuppance and knowing that his own condescension had been his undoing. The irony of him being taken down by the janitor was not lost on me or on the media. It was a narrative too perfect to ignore. But the victory felt hollow in some ways. It didn't erase Pamela's betrayal. It didn't mend my broken heart or restore my shattered trust. It was justice of a sort, but it was a cold comfort. Pamela was a wreck. The scandal at Prestige Solutions had implicated her by association, not in any wrongdoing, but as Finch's executive assistant, the one who was privy to his behavior. Her career, which she had supposedly valued so much she was willing to sacrifice her marriage for it, was in tatters. She was ostracized, humiliated. The frightened rabbit, as Finch had called her, was now truly terrified of her future. She tried to talk to me, to appeal to some lingering sense of loyalty or pity. "John, you have to believe me. I didn't know the extent of his issues," she'd stammer, her eyes red from crying. "I was just trying to do my job." "Your job?" I'd replied, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that had once consumed me. "Was sleeping with him part of your job description, Pamela? Was lying to me and our children part of it?" She had no answer to that. The divorce proceedings were initiated. There was no fight left in her. She agreed to most of my terms. The house would be sold. We'd share custody of Chloe, though Michael, now fully aware of the situation, had made it clear he wanted little to do with his mother for the time being. His disappointment in her was a heavy burden for her to bear, perhaps heavier than my anger. Telling the kids had been the hardest part of this whole ordeal. Chloe had cried, confused and hurt. Michael, older and more perceptive, had been quiet, his eyes filled with a disillusionment that broke my heart. I tried to shield them as much as possible, to reassure them that my love for them was unwavering, that this was about the breakdown of a relationship between two adults, not a reflection on them. But the scars were there. They always would be. The day I finally moved out of the house we'd shared for so many years was a somber one. Packing up my belongings, sorting through the detritus of a life built together, was like excavating an archaeological dig of our past. Each object held a memory, now tainted by the shadow of betrayal. I found old photographs of Pamela and me, young and smiling, full of hope and dreams. I looked at them, not with anger anymore, but with a profound sense of loss. Loss for the man I used to be, the woman I thought she was, the future we would never have. I didn't take many of those old mementos with me. I needed a clean break, a fresh start. My revenge on Finch was complete. He was disgraced, his career in ruins. He paid a price for his arrogance and his cruelty. But my own journey was far from over. I had to rebuild my life from the ground up. I had to learn to trust again, not just others, but myself, my own judgment. I had to find a new path, a new sense of purpose. The road ahead looked daunting, lonely even. But as I drove away from that house, leaving behind the ghosts of my past, I also felt a flicker of something else, resilience. I had been broken, yes, but not destroyed. I had faced the worst kind of betrayal and survived. I had even managed to exact a measure of justice, albeit in a way I never would have imagined. The janitor had indeed cleaned house. And now it was time to clean up his own. Looking back, it's been a couple of years since that day I walked into Pamela's office with a bouquet of lilies and walked out with a shattered life. The dust has settled, though some of the finer particles will probably linger forever, a faint reminder of the explosion. Life is different now, quieter in some ways, more honest in others. The divorce went through. We sold the house, that silent monument to our shared history and its eventual, ugly demise. Chloe splits her time between us, and it's an adjustment, this co-parenting dance, but we make it work for her sake. She's a resilient kid, tougher than I often give her credit for. Michael is in college, thriving, and our relationship, though strained for a while by the whole mess, has healed. He saw the pain Pamela caused, and he saw my struggle to pull myself back together. He calls me more often now, checks in. There's a new depth to our bond, forged in shared adversity. Pamela is trying to rebuild her life too. From what I hear, she's working a much less glamorous job, the kind that doesn't come with powerful bosses or Italian marble. She's apologized many times, in many ways. Some days, I think she's genuinely remorseful for the pain she caused, for the family she broke. Other days, I still see a flicker of that self-serving justification in her eyes. I don't hate her anymore. Hate is exhausting, and it binds you to the person you despise. What I feel now is a profound disappointment, a sadness for what we lost, for the potential that was squandered. We're civil for the kids, but the warmth, the connection we once shared, is gone forever. It's like looking at a photograph of a stranger who happens to have her face. As for Alastair Finch, his name occasionally pops up in obscure business news footnotes, usually in articles about disgraced former CEOs. His fall from grace was spectacular and public. My revenge, born of such intense personal pain and humiliation, had far-reaching consequences. Sometimes I wonder if I went too far. But then I remember his casual cruelty, his utter disregard for the lives he impacted, not just mine, but those of his employees, the people he bullied and belittled. And I remember him calling me the janitor. He reaped what he sowed. My actions weren't just about him. They were about me reclaiming my dignity, my sense of self-worth, which he and Pamela had tried so hard to strip away. I learned a lot through this ordeal. I learned that trust, once broken, is almost impossible to fully repair. I learned that people you love can betray you in ways you never thought possible. But I also learned that I am stronger than I thought. I learned that even in the darkest of times, there is a path forward, a way to rebuild, to find a new version of happiness. It's not the same exuberant, naive happiness of my younger years, but a quieter, more resilient kind, tempered by experience, hardened by scars. I'm dating again, cautiously. It's not easy. The ghost of Pamela's betrayal still whispers doubts in my ears sometimes. But I'm trying. I'm trying to believe that not everyone is deceitful, that genuine connection is still possible. I'm more guarded now, more observant, perhaps less quick to give my heart away. Some might call that jaded, but I call it self-preservation. The janitor insult, which was once a source of such burning shame, has become a strange sort of emblem for me. It reminds me that sometimes the people who are overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated are the ones who see things most clearly, the ones who can ultimately make the biggest difference. It reminds me that true worth isn't about job titles or Italian marble. It's about integrity, resilience, and the courage to stand up for yourself, even when your world is falling apart. I'm still a work in progress, still healing. But I'm moving forward, one day at a time. The future is unwritten, and for the first time in a long time, that feels more like an opportunity than a threat. Looking back, I realize I lost a part of myself, but I also found something stronger. If you've ever been betrayed, know this: you're not alone, and healing is possible. Thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real stories like this one. Until next time, take care of yourself.